Hi everyone, welcome back to A Little More Inspired. My name is Blanca. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit the follow and subscribe button so that you never miss any of my new episodes. And if you haven't done so already, please check out my website, alittlemoreinspired.com, so that you can explore all of my content. On today's episode, I am going into the final voice of the three ordinary voices of God, the voice of desire. I am very excited to dive into today's episode. I think it might be 2 videos just because there is a lot of really good information. I'm also just excited because I'm going to be finally finishing this series. I've been working on this book for the last year. Please go and purchase the book yourself. All of the content that I make is not for you to follow what I say blindly, but to make you curious and for you to go read and find answers on your own through your own merit. So yeah, let's get into the voice of desire. So the voice of desire, Matthew Kelly goes on to explain this chapter as a very powerful force that works within all of us human people. It can be harnessed for good, or it can be left to run wild without any wisdom. As you know, all of our voices, our voice of needs, our voice of talents, and our voice of desires are all interconnected, and they all work together for you to tap into your intuition and to tap into the direction God wants you to lead your life. Desire plays a powerful role in shaping our lives, can be misinterpreted in our society. I think that when we hear the word desire, we can think that it's something that is out of our control, that it is a feeling that we get that we have to always impulsively follow. Desire is a powerful tool to tap into and to have wisdom within you so that you're not just running wild with every urge that you have. Most people rise and fall based on their desires. Every scandal is a scandal of desire, not necessarily physical desire, but desires run wild. Wrong desire can destroy a person's life. There is a false ideology that claims that we do not choose our desires, that they simply emerge within us and that we have no choice but to follow them. If this were true, Matthew Kelly says, would be a horrendous form of slavery, and we would be no different from animals, which I agree. What I notice in our society is that people are constantly saying, oh, you just have to follow your desires, and especially when it comes to certain types of desires. But if that were true, he's right, we wouldn't be any different from animals. Untamed creatures that don't have conscience and don't know right from wrong. Your power to desire is unfathomable, but you also get to choose how you direct your power. There are 2 types of desires. There's focused desire versus scattered desire. Desire is the strongest when it is focused. When desire is spread across too many things, it loses its strength and becomes wasted. So this would be a good time to ask yourself, what is my desire focused on right now? What do I want it to be focused on? One of the greatest ways to mislive your life is to focus your desires on the wrong things. Ask yourself, what is God calling you to focus your unfathomable power of desire at this time in your life? Allow God to speak to you through your desires. Ask yourself honestly, is this desire from God or is this desire from the world? Learn to discern the difference between desires of God has placed in your heart and desires the culture has placed there instead. I understand why the desires of the world are so attractive, and I think that for a long time I wanted to figure out the world on my own, even though that idea wasn't necessarily bad. Reflecting back now on the beginning of that journey, I did it without ever looking to God to truly guide me. Even though I was, always seeking for growth and for expansion, I think that I always still wanted to do what I wanted to do. And after a while, you start to realize that there's an emptiness that you feel, and you can't explain why until you start to follow the feeling of trying to resolve the emptiness that you feel. People say God is good, but God is more than good. God is goodness. The wise man or woman desires God above all else. At this moment, that idea may feel impossible to grasp, and that's okay, because I don't think that I understood what that meant for a long time. Until very recently, I think I know what that means, but It took me to fall and to make mistakes for me to figure out what it means to have kind of God go silent on you. And it's not because he's punishing you, but it's because like you've lived your life without him for so long. Once you start to see his grace and his light in your life, then you don't want to lose that anymore. You don't want to lose that joy that you feel, that peace that you feel. And I do have lots of desires, but at the end of the day, I want what God wants for me most of all, because I know that that's the path that's going to bring me the most fulfillment and most peace. So, desiring the good. Give desires for the good of firm place in your mind, heart, and soul. Desire good for yourself and your family. Desire good for your friends. Desire good for strangers. Desire good for your community and your country. The power of desire is unfathomable and it will surprise you at times. Use that power well and use it for good. So now we're going to go into the basics of what desire is. God has placed desires for good deep within your heart, and he speaks to you through these deep desires for good things. The problem is that the world fills our hearts with a multitude of shallow and superficial desires. So the first challenge is this: to dig through all the shallow and superficial desires so that we can reach the deeper ones. The second challenge is to live our lives from the deepest part of self, where our truest desires reside. Each time we choose to live from our deeper desires, we expand our capacity for everything that is good, true, right, just, and noble. Each time we choose our superficial desires, our capacity for goodness becomes smaller. Too often we side with our shallow desires. When this happens repeatedly, it has disastrous effects. Our individual lives, on society as a whole, and most of all, on our souls. So yeah, I think what Matthew Kelly is trying to say here is that one of the first challenges that you'll go through when you are taking inventory of what it is that you desire, it's hard not to have shallow desires, I think, in our society, especially if you're a young person in this American world. Not even American world, in the whole world, especially now with social media. There is such an emphasis on our outside appearance and what we have and what we own and who we hang out with and what we look like on social media, that it's hard for us not to think that those things are the most important things to desire. I think that because most people don't have a spiritual life, that's just the way that the world kind of consumes you. You think that those are the things that are going to make you truly happy. The second challenge that he talks about is because we all have these shallow desires. Maybe it's, I want to be popular. I want to hang out with the cool kids. I want to go to the cool parties. But really, what you truly desire is companionship and love and to be seen. Somebody who is really living in their shallow desires might be okay with having superficial connections where they're not really truly seen. The only thing that brings you and your friends together is that you drink, go out, and you take cool pictures, or you're aesthetically pretty together, but you're not really being truly fulfilled by those people. You might have a friend who is more centered and like truly sees you and somebody that you can really talk to, but because your desires are misplaced, you will pick the friends that make you feel kind of not great inside from the friend that like truly sees you, you know, because there is this external thing that's being fed through this shallow desire. As you become more aware that those things don't fill you internally, you start to realize that the other friend who sees you, who you can really speak to, who you can truly be authentic to, is the one that truly fills your cup. Then you'll start to see that it's worth more to hang out with one really good friend than it is to hang out with a bunch of people that just look aesthetically pleasing online. So I think that's what he means in these examples. Some examples of people who desires are misplaced. People who don't know what they want are dangerous. People who want everything are dangerous. People who want the wrong things are dangerous. And people who want the right things for the wrong reasons are dangerous. The world desperately needs more people who want the right things for the right reasons. I really liked this example because anybody who is famous or seeking some kind of celebrity, fame and fortune, you can really see the power of desire working through those people because they're so determined to get whatever it is that they want, but their intentions for getting those things are always misplaced. Recently, I was kind of watching the documentary on P. Diddy, and I feel like that's a really good example of somebody who had really laser focus on a desire. He could have done so much goodness in the world because he clearly has a genius for business. But because his desires were so self-indulgent and selfish and tainted with envy and greed and just all of the vices that you can think of, his focus is where his power lies, is that he focused on something that he wanted, which was fame and fortune and to be influential in his industry. But then he used all of that power to manipulate and to destroy people who have real talent. He used it for all the wrong reasons. And if you think about, like, what if his desires would have been rightly placed, like if he would have had God in his heart, or if he would have wanted to have this position in this industry to truly help the community he comes from, or help rising artists be protected in this industry that can really suck the light out of people who have really deep creativity. I think that is like a perfect example of somebody who wanted everything for the wrong reasons. Or people who don't know what they want. Like, I think I've been there where I haven't always known what I wanted. I've wanted to explore so many things that in the end I've just wasted kind of time. Your desires have to be well focused, and that there is a calling within your own being that you have to discover so that that power of focus can be really developed. The world desperately needs more people who want the right things for the right reasons. We need more influencers and leaders and creatives that want to create and influence and guide because they want to be good in the world, but genuinely good, like goodness from inspiration from God. Because what I've realized too is that if you look at people in politics who are doing a lot of harm, or even if you look at a lot of villains, they think that they're doing good, but they're all self-made ideas. They're not ideas that are truly coming from source and from a higher being that teaches kindness and compassion and tolerance. For example, I recently have been watching the show The Chosen on Amazon Prime, and I'm on season 5, so they're in the season where they're telling the story of Judas. I have a lot of compassion for Judas now in a way that I didn't before. Well, I always kind of feel like I somewhat understood that he wasn't necessarily evil deep down, but he had misplaced desires. Like in the show, I think they do a really good job at showing his confusion. Like, he thought he knew better than Jesus. He thought he knew better than God's plan. He thought that God needed to be this Messiah or this king that ruled through politics or through power. But God's kingdom was going to be different. It was the kingdom of the soul, the kingdom of the spirit. And so Judas thinks that he's helping Jesus by manipulating the situation, by forcing him to show his miracles and his abilities by tempting him. And so Judas falls, not necessarily because he's truly an evil person, but because his ideas of goodness were misplaced. And he didn't trust in God's plan. He believed that his plan was better than Jesus' plan. He started off good when he started following Jesus. He genuinely wanted to stop being this like money-focused guy who only worried about becoming wealthy and to make an impact in the world. And he joins Jesus' apprentice or apostles because he wants to do good. But because he is unwilling to have humility and to surrender to what Jesus is teaching him, he is led down the wrong path and eventually falls because of his desire to take control over something that wasn't his to control. And then when he does fall, eventually, obviously, he hangs himself because he doesn't think that God is going to forgive him. He doesn't think Jesus is going to forgive him. And if he would have been listening to all of the teachings that God was showing him and teaching him, he would have known that just like when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, he came back to Jesus and he apologized, and Jesus obviously forgave him. And he didn't think that he was forgivable. So yeah, your desires need to be focused on God's love and on the path that he wants for your life. And that sometimes means that you aren't always going to understand the path he has you on. But I think that's like a journey that everybody has to go on, obviously. So yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense. The gift of focused desire is the ability to focus our desire on anything we choose is an astounding ability. It is one of the universal talents we spoke about earlier. Why desire is so powerful is that when we finally figure out what it is that we want and we are able to laser focus on what it is that we are looking for, we can move mountains at times. A few years ago, I became laser focused on wanting to heal my traumas, on becoming emotionally intelligent. And I feel like I became so passionate about reading and learning because I was determined to change the way that I related to people and how I felt my place in the world. People who have done great things, it's because they've focused on one desire and they've laser focused on mastering it. And it is time to discover the deepest desires God has placed within you. It is time to acknowledge that God placed them there for a reason. It is time to align our thoughts, words, and actions and choices with the deepest desires of our hearts. Discerning what is coming from God and what is coming from the world is something that you can discern through your own spiritual work. And listening for God's direction, we often make the mistake of asking the wrong people, what do you think I should do with my life? But this is a question meant to be asked to God in silence, in prayer. I feel like when I was younger and I didn't have any true spiritual strength, or I didn't have like a strong identity, I was always asking everybody what I should do with my life because I didn't know what I wanted. And then B, I also was deeply afraid of accountability. I felt like if I failed, then if I would ask somebody else and they told me to go in that direction, then if it went wrong, then I could blame them. Well, you told me to do this. Well, you told me to do that. I didn't have any conviction with myself. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have, wise counsel. You should look for wise counsel in your life. People who you trust, you feel like they truly live virtuous lives and that they mean you well. Maybe you are further along in your journey and asking, what should I do with the rest of my life? Whatever the question is, ask God, listen to the 3 voices, and the direction you are seeking will emerge. When you finally start to listen to those voices and you truly start to step into your authentic power, into your divine power, some things have to crash and burn for the direction to emerge. Sometimes you have to go through heartbreak before you have the power to move in the direction God actually wants you to go in. I think that a lot of the times when I've had to follow God's guidance, I've also had to leave old stories and people behind, and it hasn't always been easy. But in the end, it was necessary for me to elevate. We're going to go into the trivial many versus the essential few. We live in a culture of more and more and more. Because of this, most people have never paused to consider the virtues of less. But when it comes to your God-given ability to desire, less is both more and better. Cast aside the trivial many and embrace the vital few. So what is essential? This is the question we as finite beings living finite lives are forced to consider, especially in a world of unlimited opportunities and possibilities. So what is essential? It is about giving priority to what matters most and letting go of what matters least. Meaning that somebody who is a non-essentialist is focused on 1,000 passion projects. Rather, somebody who is an essentialist will focus on one project at a time, or one project that truly fulfills him to truly master it, rather than becoming like mediocre at a lot of little things. The non-essentialist believes everything is important. The essentialist understands that only a few things truly matter. We're going to go into what Matthew Kelly calls FOMO to JOMO, which is fear of missing out to joy of missing out. I used to have a really bad problem with fear of missing out. So, what is fear of missing out? It drives people to overcommit, stay distracted, and avoid choosing. Fear of missing out causes people to make some of the worst decisions of their lives because they don't want to miss out on this momentary moment of fun or this momentary moment of pleasure. It is distraction in modern life. Without intentional focus, we live lives of constant distraction. Distraction leads to lack of commitment, shallow living, quiet desperation. We are busy but not fulfilled. There's like an emptiness that's inside of us. So, the lie of having it all. The idea is that we can do everything, have everything, and miss nothing. And this is delusional because it is inherent that we are going to miss out on a lot of things. In fact, you will miss out on most things. FOMO's close cousins is the fear of settling. Settling is unavoidable because life is finite, time is limited. Every choice is a decision to miss out on something else. Which is true. Like, I feel like now everybody thinks that they have unlimited time. They forget that they're going to die. They never commit to like one thing because they think that they're going to miss out on something better. And so they never truly cherish what they have. Commitment is not failure. Success requires commitment. Commitment means choosing one path and letting go of others. Refusing to commit is more dangerous form of settling. Keeping all options open kills depth, mastery, and love. In FOMO culture, you see it a lot in relationships and in career. Many struggle in relationships because they want to keep their options open. I feel like now relationships aren't really seen as like this sacred experience with somebody that you can share your life with. Especially now with social media, we're just bombarded with access to so many people and we're connected to so many people. I mean, you could be in a loving relationship with somebody, but if that man, has access and is following all of these women, he's always going to have this idea that, well, if this doesn't work out, I'm definitely going to find someone better because he is constantly being fed images of the possibility of being with somebody else. And so people don't experience true love anymore. They experience more of like a convenience. Well, this is convenient for right now. So it's better to miss out on most things because the only thing that truly matters are what God has chosen for you. So the deeper idea is that desires are like a bridge. Sometimes our desires reach for very ordinary earthly things like comfort, pleasure, security, success. But underneath those surface desires, there's usually something deeper, a longing to feel wholeness, a longing for love, a longing for meaning, a longing for God. So the wisest people across spiritual traditions learned this: if you desire your deepest and legitimate needs first, such as truth, love, goodness, God, everything else will fall into the proper place. Some people learn this quickly, others learn it through struggle, through resistance, through pain and failure. But wisdom comes from learning how to desire well, not from killing desire altogether. When I read about the saints, you realize like, wow, those are people who understood the deepest desires very quickly. And somebody had told me to read the book of Saint Therese of Lisieux. And when I was reading her book, and then I kind of watched the movie too, she died really young. I think she died at like 15 years old. And she's a saint because she realized from a very young age that her deepest desire was to be near God and to follow God's will for her. But I also found it hard to relate to her because she comes from a family that was very loving, and she talks about how much she loved her parents and her family was really religious, and she talks about how the sun was always shining on her and, the flowers pointed in her direction while she was walking down like the fields. And I was like, girl, like, obviously she became a saint because everything in her life set her up to live this very authentic religious life because her family was already so religious. And she wasn't really exposed to anything that could have led her down the wrong path. And so even though I really liked her story because she knew what she wanted from a really young age, and she lived out her dream of becoming a nun by like the age of maybe 12 or 13, she already knew she wanted to be a nun. But she did have suffering in her life. Her mom died at a young age, and she, struggled with physical illnesses. She always gave her sufferings to God. But again, like, I did find it a little hard to relate to her because people tell you this is how you should live life and look at the saints. But sometimes not every saint is for you. I really liked Saint Teresa of Avila's story much more, or I related to her much more because Saint Teresa really struggled with fully committing to her vocation because of the attractiveness of the world. And she was so honest about it. It was from a place of deep surrender, allowing the call to become stronger in her. I think that a lot of us haven't been in environments that have cultivated those deeper desires. We have come from parents that have been in the world or have had their own spiritual struggles, or maybe our parents haven't believed in God. We come from traumas, or our environments haven't developed a child that is going to be like necessarily be a saint. And so it can be hard to like leave the worldly desires because that's really all you've known. When she says that some people learn the legitimate needs of desires from a very young age, and then there's some of us who kick and scream and then we realize it. Some people have to fall many times. Like, I think I've had to hit some deep rock bottoms for me to realize what truly matters. God has had to strip me sometimes from the life that I've wanted for me to like truly find him again. So if you're in this place of like back and forth, that's okay. Like, don't be hard on yourself because you haven't done everything perfectly. It's not always necessarily your fault. But in those deep rock bottoms and you're asking for direction, remember who took you out of them. I look back at my life when I went on a journey of wanting to know what God meant for me, what the world meant for me. And I would hit these rock bottoms, and I remember like very ferociously, fervently praying to God, please help me. But then when I was doing good again and I was in the world having fun, I would forget about God and I wouldn't pray to him and I wouldn't ask him for direction anymore because I was doing good. And then I would have to fall again. But now I'm in a place where I've fallen, but as I'm rising and I'm in a better place, I don't want to let go of God anymore like I did in the past. And to lose sight of like the true direction rather than the direction of like having a good time. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So simple, consistent needs often fulfill us more than big achievements. Having your basic needs met regularly is often more satisfying in the long run than achieving one huge once-in-a-lifetime desire. That's not meaning that you shouldn't have once-in-a-lifetime desires. It just means that overall, big achievements can feel amazing, but the feeling fades. You're always on to the next thing. What am I going to do next to get that feeling again? But when you are grounded in your daily nourishment, your peace, your love, your purpose, and stability may not feel dramatic, but they quietly sustain joy over time. So the wisdom behind it is, true wisdom is learning to desire what you need first before chasing what you merely want. Because needs nourish life, wants just decorate it. So I think I'm going to end this first part of the episode here because I think this is a good place to stop. And then the following episode, I will go into what our physical desires, what our emotional desires, and our intellectual desires are, and the desire behind all desires, which are our spiritual desires and our desire for God. I think this is a good place to end, and hope that you enjoyed this episode and I left you good food for thought. So thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye guys.